Welcome back to the deep dive. It's great to have you with us again.
Good to be here.
Today we're diving into something pretty fundamental, I think. It's about creativity. Specifically, where does that spark actually come from?
That elusive spark.
It's that question we all ask, right? Staring at a blank page or maybe a tough problem and just thinking, where do you genuinely new ideas? Where do they come from?
And how do you find them consistently? Inspiration that feels, authentic and actually makes an impact.
Exactly. Impactful and genuinely yours. So this deep dive, I think it's going to challenge some common assumptions. We're aiming to go way beyond the usual advice, the sort of simple stuff.
Yeah, the think outside the box cliches, because the process, it often feels almost, magical, like lightning striking.
Totally.
But our main source today, Redefine Imaginify, it offers a really different perspective, almost strategic. It's less about waiting for lightning.
And more about understanding the mechanics.
Exactly. The mechanics of how novel thoughts actually begin, and importantly, how we can maybe cultivate them. It offers something much more concrete than just platitudes.
Right, not just tips, but a framework, a unique one, which is why we wanted to dig into it. Redefine Imaginify tries to sort of demystify how profound inspiration works.
I'm repairing it with another source too, right?
Yeah, we've got supplementary hypothetical source research. We're calling it research innovationaries. This one gives us some data, some case studies.
Oh, okay. To ground it a bit more.
Exactly. To help us understand how these really new ideas, the ones born from this framework, how they actually connect with people, how they resonate, and crucially, how they gain traction, especially now, in the digital world with algorithms running everything.
Which is a huge piece of the puzzle today. What struck me about both sources is their ambition. They're not just offering, like, a quick checklist.
No.
It feels like they're suggesting a whole system. Understanding how diverse inputs, often really surprising ones, feed into creative work.
Yeah.
It pushes you to look beyond the obvious places for inspiration.
Yeah, and it talks about this concept of an internal architect.
Right, that part of your mind that takes all these raw inputs and shapes them into something new.
Yeah.
How you can strategically fuel that architect.
So if you, listening, have ever wondered, how do I get genuinely new ideas? Or what really sparks creativity in a way that works and stands out, then this should be right up your alley.
Hopefully.
Our mission today is really to follow the path of an idea from that first little flicker inside the mind.
The ignition phase.
Yeah, let's call it that. All the way to how it takes root and makes an impact out there, especially online with all the noise.
And this connects back, doesn't it, to that big question we sort of left hanging.
It does. How do you create something that's authentically you, your vision, but also manages to, cut through, beat the algorithms, maybe even go viral organically?
The million-dollar question for basically any creator today.
Exactly. And these sources, Redefine Imaginify and Research Innovationaries, they start to give us some clue by looking at the deep mechanics of novelty itself.
So, where do we start? Where does Redefine Imaginify begin its exploration?
Okay, so it starts, maybe surprisingly, with our environment. Places and experiences, but not in the way you might think.
Not the perfect quiet studio?
Not necessarily. It actually emphasizes places that actively shake up your routine or give you new kinds of sensory input.
Shake things up. How so?
The core idea seems to be about breaking your patterns, nudging you out of your usual mental tracks, forcing a bit of a shift.
Huh. That definitely feels counterintuitive. Most advice is about creating that perfect, stimulating desk space, right? With all your inspirational objects around you.
Exactly. This is more about environments that almost deliberately disrupt your habits, maybe even feel a bit off.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Why? What's the logic behind embracing that disruption?
Well, Redefine Imaginify uses a specific term for these kinds of places. It calls them liminal spaces.
Liminal spaces. Okay, like threshold spaces, in between zones.
Precisely. Those transitional places we often just pass through, maybe places we even find a bit boring or annoying sometimes.
Right. Give us some examples from the source, because these aren't usually where we think, inspiration.
Okay, think about airport departure lounges, waiting rooms, doctors, dentists, laundromats, bus stops.
Mundane places.
Totally mundane. Or even that quiet moment just before a train arrives, or your commute. Or the classic one, taking a shower. Places where you're not really doing anything specific, but you're not fully relaxed either. You're just in between.
Yeah, okay. Places most of us are probably just trying to kill time in, right?
Yeah.
Scrolling on our phones, feeling impatient, Trying to check out mentally.
Exactly. We actively try to distract ourselves from what feels like wasted time. So the big question Redefine Imaginify asks is, why are these seemingly boring, maybe even irritating places actually powerful for creativity?
It seems to go against the grain. What's their argument?
The argument is pretty interesting. It's because in these liminal spaces, your usual routines aren't running. The familiar things that normally anchor your thoughts, your office setup, your home environment, they're absent.
Okay, so the anchors are gone.
And because of that absence, your mind is kind of set free. It's unmoored.
Unmoored. How does that freeing work exactly? What's happening cognitively?
Well, your thinking isn't tied down to your to-do list or your office habits or the usual sights and sounds. That whole structure your brain normally relies on is like temporarily dissolved.
Ah, okay. So you're not actively problem solving, not responding to the usual stimuli. The cognitive gears are sort of disengaged from the normal tracks.
Right. And Redefine Imaginify suggests this creates a kind of cognitive white space.
White space, like empty mental space.
Kind of. Think about your brain's usual pathways. They get really efficient through routine, but also rigid, like deep grooves.
Mental ruts, yeah. We fall into them easily.
Exactly. Liminal spaces, the source says, act like hitting a reset button. They force your brain to make new temporary connections because those old dominant pathways aren't being activated.
So it's in that unstructured mental space that new ideas can surface, ideas that wouldn't pop up when you're focused on a task.
Precisely. It's like driving a familiar route versus being detoured. On the familiar route, your mind's elsewhere. On the detour, you have to pay attention, make new connections.
Okay, so in a laundromat, maybe watching the clothes tumble, that rhythm could connect to something totally unrelated, like a design problem.
That's the idea. The mundane becomes a trigger because it disrupts the expected flow of thought. It's less about the place itself being inspiring and more about how it breaks your mental pattern.
It forces your brain to create new ones, even just temporarily. It's like a deliberate disruption of habit.
Yeah, letting your brain play around in a different way, it creates a kind of vacuum almost, and your imagination tries to fill it. Without the usual inputs, it starts looking for new connections.
That actually makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. The brain starts searching for novel associations when it's not getting its usual diet of information.
Right. When we're in a familiar space, the brain's often on autopilot. Efficient, but maybe not innovative. In these in-between zones, the autopilot switches off.
Forcing more active, maybe more spontaneous thinking.
I bet most of us have had ideas pop up waiting for a flight or something without really thinking about why then.
Absolutely. And this framework gives us a reason. It reframes that wasted time, waiting, commuting, showering into potential prime creative thinking time.
It's like forced divergent thinking practice, deliberately unmooring the mind, giving it permission to wander and connect things unexpectedly.
Okay, so that's one side. Disruptive, pattern-breaking liminal spaces. What about the other classic source of inspiration, nature? Does the source talk about that, the calm, restorative side?
It does, absolutely. And it connects nature to inspiration through another really interesting concept, effortless attention.
Effortless attention. That sounds almost contradictory, doesn't it? Attention usually feels like effort.
Right. But think about the kind of attention you use when you're just watching waves roll in,
Right.
or clouds drifting, or listening to leaves rustling.
Okay. You're observing, you're present, but it doesn't feel like work.
Exactly. It's not strenuous mental effort. It's more of a gentle, wandering focus, sometimes called soft fascination.
Very different from the focus needed for, say, coding or writing a report. That's directed attention.
Totally different. With effortless attention, your mind is engaged, but it's not taxed. It's like letting your gaze sweep across a landscape versus staring intently at one point.
I get the distinction.
Yeah.
And just allowing the experience to wash over you. So what are the benefits of this state for creativity, according to Redefine Imaginify?
Well, the big one is that this relaxed state actively and pretty significantly reduces mental fatigue.
Okay, that makes intuitive sense. Brain drain is definitely real. Constant demands, information overload.
So giving our brain this kind of break creates more mental capacity, like clearing out background apps on your phone.
That's a good analogy. You're freeing up resources. Our brains get tired from sustained, directed focus.
Yeah.
Effortless attention is like a proper break without fully shutting down,
Hmm.
and it allows the default mode network to kick in.
The DMN. Yeah, that's linked to mind-wandering, daydreaming.
Internal thought, yeah. And strongly linked to creative problem solving, making those unexpected connections. It's like your brain's background processing unit.
Okay.
When you're not focused on an external task, It's busy synthesizing information, connecting ideas. So, by reducing mental fatigue, you're opening up cognitive space for imagination, decluttering the mental workspace.
Making room for ideas to bump into each other without the pressure of an overworked mind. The source calls it a mental palate cleanser, which I like.
A mental palate cleanser. That's good. It refreshes your cognitive capacity.
So what we're seeing here are two really distinct types of environmental triggers. Both vital, apparently, but working in almost opposite ways.
That sums it up perfectly. On one hand, the deliberate disruption of liminal spaces shaking the system awake.
Thriving on novelty, yeah.
And on the other, the relaxed openness and cognitive restoration from nature via effortless attention, calming the system, making it receptive.
Different paths, same goal. Fostering insight. So practically, for you listening, this suggests a much more nuanced way to think about your surroundings.
It does. Your environment isn't just passive background. It's an active tool.
An active tool for creative thinking. It's about being intentional, choosing the right environment for the right mental state you need. Surroundings become active partners.
And presumably, the unique state these environments foster is already a first step toward creating something distinct, something that might cut through algorithmic noise later.
I think so. It lays the groundwork for genuine novelty, moving away from just rehashing familiar patterns.
Okay, that makes sense. So that covers the environmental side. Okay. Now, what about the inputs? You mentioned Redefine Imaginify. Talks a lot about the creative works we consume, books, movies, art.
Yeah, a big part of it. But again, with a twist, it's not just about passively consuming more stuff.
Right. That's a common trap. Thinking more input automatically equals more creativity. It's not about quantity.
No, so it's not about just binge-watching everything or reading every bestseller.
Not at all. The source uses this phrase. It sounds a bit academic, but the concept is powerful. Narrative cross-pollination.
Narrative cross-pollination. Okay. Yeah. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means actively seeking out stories, styles, themes, even just emotional tones from really different, unconnected areas.
Different disciplines, different eras.
Exactly. Different disciplines, historical periods, cultural contexts. It's about deliberately seeking contrast, intentionally creating a kind of intellectual friction by exposing yourself to ideas and forms that don't normally mix.
Okay, so the exact opposite of sticking to your favorite genre or staying in your intellectual comfort zone.
Precisely. It's the antidote to filter bubbles. The goal is to force your brain to connect things that seem totally unrelated, to provoke an internal collision.
But why? Why seek out that clash? It feels like it could just be confusing. Why is that friction productive, according to the source?
It's central to their framework. They argue that forcing your brain to wrestle with these wildly different inputs actively stimulates new neural pathways. You're building new bridges in your mind.
How does that work cognitively when you're hit with such different stuff?
Well, the brain loves patterns, right? It's always seeking connections. When you feed it diverse, almost clashing inputs, say, deep dive into astrophysics, then immediately immerse yourself in ancient poetry, it has to work harder to find or create some kind of link.
Ah, okay. It breaks your existing ways of thinking, challenges assumptions.
Exactly. It helps you form entirely new mental models. The effort of trying to reconcile the differences, to find coherence in the dissonance, that's what generates the new insight. It's not about finding obvious links. It's about forcing your mind to invent new frameworks.
That's powerful. And the research innovationary source backs this up, right? Suggesting breakthroughs often happen at the intersection of previously separate fields.
Absolutely. That collision point is often where the most fertile ground for innovation lies.
Can you give us a really vivid example from Redefine Imaginify? What does this cross-pollination look like in practice, something concrete?
Okay, the source uses this example. Imagine spending time deep in a complex cyberpunk novel. Futuristic tech, social commentary, AI, that whole dark neon aesthetic.
Got it. Heavy conceptual stuff.
And then right after that, you deliberately immerse yourself in Renaissance art, studying the symbolism in a Botticelli, the anatomy in a Michelangelo, the philosophy behind it all.
Wow. Okay. Cyberpunk dystopia to Renaissance beauty, that's a massive leap. My brain feels the whiplash just thinking about it. Isn't that just confusing?
And that feeling, that whiplash, that tension, that's exactly where Redefine Imaginify says the magic happens. These unexpected juxtapositions, they don't just sit there quietly. They clash, they collide. Different creative ideas, forms, emotions crashing together.
And the friction itself isn't the problem, it's the engine.
It's the engine. Think about it. If you only read fantasy, your ideas might stay within that realm. Good variations, maybe, but true novelty is harder. but injects something totally different. Abstract painting, Stoic philosophy, classical music
Right,
structures.
truly foreign elements.
You create this incredibly fertile ground. Your brain, trying to make sense of it, has to operate way outside its usual grooves. It's not passive appreciation. It's using them as active ingredients.
Ingredients, that's the perfect word. Like raw materials in a mental lab. Consciously mixing them to spark something new.
It's like an active, almost chemical reaction in your mind, an alchemical process. The friction is the heat. And this clash, this alchemy, leads to something genuinely new, something with unique advantages in our digital world.
Ah, okay. And how does this connect to standing out online, getting traction?
Well, redefine Imaginify makes this crucial point. Creativity isn't magic, pulling things out of thin air, mostly a myth.
It's more like synthesis,
Yeah,
transformation.
exactly. The output of that internal architect, the part doing the mixing, is inherently a synthesis, a transformation of existing ideas. But because it draws from such diverse, clashing inputs, it leads to something genuinely novel.
And that novelty, born from the clash, is what can challenge algorithms and cut through the noise.
That's the core idea. Think about algorithms. They're basically like pattern-matching machines, right?
Yeah, looking for what fits existing trends, what worked before. They look backwards.
Exactly. They predict future engagement based on past success, optimized by recognizing existing patterns. But the internal architect, fueled by narrative cross-pollination, thrives on creating new patterns, unexpected connections. It's inherently forward-looking.
So the most creative stuff might actually fail the algorithm test initially because it's too different.
It's very possible, even likely. The most impactful ideas long-term could be the ones that initially confuse the algorithms because they don't fit any existing box. They're those unexpected juxtapositions.
And the research innovationary source backs this up empirically.
It does. It argues that truly novel content might struggle at first because algorithms don't know where to place it. It doesn't match known success patterns.
But there's a payoff if it breaks through.
A big one. Once it does connect with people, it often has deeper stickiness, more shareability, precisely because it's unique. It stands out. It feels fresh compared to generic algorithm-optimized stuff.
So algorithms might ignore it, but humans recognize novelty. And that human recognition gives it organic traction, bypassing the algorithmic gatekeepers.
That seems to be the argument. If you blend sci-fi and Renaissance art, the result has inherent uniqueness. That strangeness, that unexpected blend becomes its own hook.
It draws attention because it's different, not because it's similar.
Exactly. Creations from this process tend to have a distinct voice. That distinctiveness helps them stand out from the flood of generic content designed just to please the algorithm. They spark curiosity.
And Research Innovationaries has case studies of this. Stuff that flew under the radar then exploded via word of mouth.
Apparently so. Things that struck people because they were so original.
Wow. Okay, this really changes how you think about everything you consume, doesn't it? It's not just passive entertainment.
Not if you don't want it to be. It can be active creative process, turning leisure into intentional fieldwork for ideas. Active, mindful curation.
Every piece of content, every observation becomes a potential ingredient, like building a diverse pantry for your brain, exotic spices.
Exactly. The sources guide you to become a proactive curator of your mind's inputs, seeing everything not just for what it is, but for what it could become when combined uniquely by your internal architect.
Building a vast mental library of bits and pieces ready to be remixed.
And the research suggests audiences are actually hungry for that novelty, tired of the predictable, craving authenticity and the unexpected, which is exactly what this process fosters.
A curator for your brain. I like that. And it connects back to the environment too, right? Knowing if you need disruption or calm and combining that with curating inputs, it's an integrated system.
It really is. Designing your whole creative ecosystem, physical and intellectual spaces, to encourage that synthesis. Not waiting for a muse, but setting the table for inspiration.
So it's more systematic than just random tricks, almost scientific in a way.
That's the idea. Challenging the notion that creativity is just some innate gift. It suggests it's a dynamic process you can understand, nurture, optimize through deliberate choices, empowering everyone to be a conscious architect of their own inspiration.
An architect of inspiration, that's empowering. But as we talk about this power, the power of the internal architect to generate genuinely new ideas, ideas that can cut through noise and influence people rapidly, it immediately brings up something critical, something redefine Imaginify, while explaining how this happens, doesn't explicitly map out
But just
the ethics, the responsibilities that come with wielding that kind of creative power.
That's absolutely crucial, and it's where the implications get really significant. Redefine Imaginify gives you the tools for profound novelty, but the power it describes, creating sticky, shareable ideas that spread globally at lightning speed, inherently raises huge ethical questions.
The blueprint is there, but the ethical burden falls on the creator.
Entirely.
So let's unpack that. First, the sheer scale of impact. If your ideas can influence large audiences quickly, bypassing old gatekeepers, what's the responsibility there?
It means creators have this immense responsibility for the nature of what they release. When ideas are designed to be viral, their potential for good and harm is amplified. It's not just personal expression anymore, it's public impact. Unique content might reach people unprepared for it, lacking context.
That's heavy. And then the idea that the creative process itself shapes new pathways and insights. Our creations aren't just products, they influence future thinking.
Exactly. So the ethical question becomes, how do we ensure these insights contribute positively? Are creators obligated to consider the societal implications of their disruptive ideas, especially since the framework values disruption?
Right, it encourages breaking thought patterns. But what if the new patterns are harmful? Misinformation, division?
Creators become architects not just of ideas, but potentially of future thinking. There's an implicit obligation to consider if the disruption is constructive. We're directly influencing how others perceive the world.
And the third point, redefine Imaginify, emphasizes creating something genuinely you, your unique vision. But in the digital world, with constant replication, remixing, copying, how do you protect that integrity?
That highlights the tension, yeah, between the uniqueness the source champions and the fluid nature of digital content. The source doesn't give concrete strategies for protecting that integrity once it's out there.
So creators have to navigate that, safeguarding their work while acknowledging digital content gets reused, remixed.
Exactly. Protecting your creative progeny while accepting its journey once released. It's a complex responsibility.
So pulling this together, the whole cycle inputs lead to creations, which become inputs for others means creators need to be really intentional about the quality and impact of what they add to the collective pool.
Yes. It compels us to be conscious architects, not just of what we consume, but critically of the ingredients we introduce into the collective imagination. Every original thought becomes input for others. We're shaping the future landscape.
So redefine Imaginify, powerful as it is on the how-to of novelty, really leads us straight into this vital ethical landscape. The power of the internal architect comes with a significant burden of responsibility.
It absolutely does. And the core ethical questions aren't explicitly answered by the source. They're the questions the framework provokes.
Yeah.
It demands we consider the ethical implications of this creative power in our interconnected world.
Okay, so for you listening right now, thinking about this framework and these ethical dimensions, what can you actually do differently? How do you apply this practically, responsibly?
Well, the big shift is towards being deliberate, proactive, and deeply responsible. Not just setting the stage for inspiration, but thoughtfully considering the ripple effect of what you create. Turning ignored things into tools and created things into potential forces of influence.
Okay, concrete starting points. First steps for being this architect of inspiration, but consciously.
All right, first, actively seek out those liminal spaces. Use them intentionally. Waiting room, airport lounge, stuck in traffic. This isn't just killing time, it's deliberately freeing your mind. And crucially, resist the urge to grab your phone. Put it away.
Ooh, that's the hard part.
It is, but try it. Let your mind drift. Look around. Notice weird details, snippets of conversation, the light. Use that in-between time consciously. Let your brain break free. See what bubbles up. Turn downtime into active mind-wandering time. Even an unfamiliar walk helps disrupt the familiar.
Okay, turn weights into potential. What about the nature side? Effortless attention with that restorative power in mind. Be intentional about that, too. Carve out moments for it. Doesn't have to be a huge hike. Sitting by a window watching rain. Observing leaves in a park. Listening to birdsong. The key is effortless. Just allow your mind to gently observe and rest. No specific goal.
Let the brain recharge, declutter. Essential mental recovery, creating spaciousness for ideas to connect later. Okay, and the input side, narrative cross-pollination, done mindfully.
This needs conscious, disciplined effort, and ethical reflection. Deliberately diversify your mental diet. Go way beyond your comfort zone, but with a critical eye. Ask yourself about the potential impact of these ideas.
So if you love thrillers, try surrealist poetry or a biography of an obscure scientist or ancient philosophy.
Exactly. If you watch comedies, try a complex foreign drama, a deep-sea documentary, historical fashion, Find the clash. Seek the friction between styles, ideas, eras.
Remember sci-fi and Renaissance art? Yes. Seek those dissonant inputs. But as you do, consciously ask, what's the essence here? How does this resonate with human values? If I synthesize something new from this, what's its likely impact? Is it constructive? Uplifting? Does it challenge positively?
Okay. And the big picture mindset shift, the overall approach.
It's reframing how you see everything you engage with, consuming, and creating. Content isn't just for enjoyment or info, it's potential raw material. And what you create becomes input for the collective imagination.
Raw material for your synthesis, seeing everything films, books, conversations, observations as potential building blocks, becoming an active forager for your internal architect.
Exactly. Your whole life, approached intentionally, becomes a continuous wellspring of inspiration. And with that wellspring comes the continuous responsibility to steward its flow ethically.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, Redefine Imaginify Research Innovation Areas. It's given us a really specific, almost tactical view of inspiration, clearly not just random luck.
Not at all. It suggests inspiration can be systematically encouraged, cultivated, sparked by environments, disruptive liminal spaces, restorative nature, fueled by active narrative cross-pollination, using diverse works intentionally to create productive clashes.
Collisions of ideas leading to something genuinely new, something that might even have a unique edge online because it defies easy categorization.
Exactly.
And this whole framework, plus the ethical considerations we've layered on, it leaves us, and you, the listener, with a really fascinating question to chew on, doesn't it?
I think it really does. If creativity is so shaped by these external things, disruptive places, restorative nature, clashing inputs is creativity, mostly just about getting good at setting up the right external triggers, optimizing your surroundings and media diet. Is it mainly about controlling the outside world?
Or is the really deep work internal?
Yeah.
Is it more about building our own capacity, that internal architect, to actively find inputs, choose wisely, synthesize skillfully, making original meaning, cultivating the inner world?
And maybe the biggest question it provokes, where does the balance lie between external influence and internal cultivation, especially considering the ethical weight of our creations? Is the real skill navigating that interplay, mastering external triggers and internal synthesis, while taking profound responsibility for the outputs that shape the collective imagination?
That's the question we really want to leave you with, something to keep this deep dive going in your own thinking. We really hope this has given you a lot to consider, some fresh angles on finding, sparking, and crucially responsibly wielding your own imagination.